All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Monroe County History Center and to our panel on the future of news. For those of you who are just tuning in this stage of our newsprint history, this is actually the final panel discussion we're having throughout the run of our exhibit, Breaking the News, the Past and Uncertain Future of Local Print Journalism. It's still on display until December 30th, so you do have time to see it while you're here today if you would like, or if you'd like to come back at another time. My name's Andrea Hatzel. I'm the education manager here, and I would like to thank you all again for being here, taking time out of your weekend, as well as to our panelists for taking time out of your weekend to have this really important discussion. This program is supported by Indiana Humanities in cooperation with the National Endowment for Humanities. So Indiana Humanities has been gracious enough to support us with their mission through connecting people and opening minds and enriching discussions by having programs like this across the state. I would like to introduce our moderator as well as our panel for this afternoon. I'll start with Z, because he gave me the shortest paragraph and I still fluffed it up. So Bob Zaltsberg served for 33 years as an editor of the Herald Times, and you can even read about him in our exhibit. He's featured in the Modern Newsroom. He's a current staff member for WFIU TIU News. Please check out his series on the news industry. We just had a Noon Edition Live recorded here not too long ago, and it was a fascinating discussion. Quite wonderful. And he is also an adjunct faculty member in the IU Media School. Filled with fascinating stories, Bob was actually a panelist on our History of News panel in September, so you can check that out. Trust me, there are some great stories and great comments from that one. We also have joining us today as our panelists Jim Rodenbush, who is the Director of Student Media and an instructor in the media school at Indiana University. At IU, he works alongside the student leaders of the Indiana Daily Student, Monroe County's longest running newspaper. Go students. He also works with the students on the Arbutus Yearbook and IU Student Television. In addition to working with those student media organizations, he has taught a variety of editing and multi-platform reporting classes. Jim has spent nearly 20 years as a college journalism instructor and 14 years in college media advising, previously serving in newsroom advising roles at Webster, Penn State, and Colorado State Universities. Prior to his time in college media, Jim was an editor and reporter for a variety of publications and news organizations in Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Missouri. Next to him, we have Jeremy Hogan. Jeremy, a California native, began journalism and photography during high school, freelancing for a local newspaper. He earned a BS in journalism from San Jose State University, and in junior high, he documented the skateboarding culture in his hometown. He interned at prestigious publications, including the Indianapolis News, Kansas City Star, and Palm Beach Post. Then he worked over 2 decades at the Herald Times in Bloomington until 2019, when the newspaper changed ownership. Hogan launched the Bloomingtonian in 2019, and in early 2023, he earned runner-up honors for Indiana News Photographer of the Year. He even brought his camera on stage, too. It's like a permanent attachment. With the Bloomingtonian, he covers local, regional, and national news. And finally, we have Dave Askins. Dave grew up in Columbus, Indiana, but never hung out with former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. I still can't. I practice this and try not to laugh right now. I'm sorry. Okay. In college, Askins studied math and not journalism. To earn a livelihood, Askins has worked as a data analyst, animal cage cleaner, German teacher, grocery loading dock receiver, and in various other strategic leadership roles. His initial foray into journalism came in 2005 when he launched Teeter Talk, a website documenting interviews conducted with guests while riding his homemade backyard teeter-totter. With his wife, Mary Morgan, he later co-founded the Ann Arbor Chronicle, a website specializing in local government news. After operating the Chronicle for 6 years, Askin moved to South Dakota, reporting local news for 2 daily newspapers there. In late 2018, Askins and Morgans returned to Bloomington, where they met in the late 80s. And in July 2019, Askins launched what is now the B Square Bulletin, reporting news about Bloomington and Monroe County government. Thank you all so much for being here. And Bob, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Wow, this is a really good turnout. I've been to all these panels. This is by far the largest turnout. So hopefully you have lots of questions and lots of ideas, solutions, and we can go from there. I want to ask each of these guys first. I want to start with Dave Askins at the other end about their mission. Dave and Jeremy have started things from nothing, basically. Jim is working, as Andrew said, for the longest serving newspaper in Bloomington. But for Dave and Jeremy, and then for Jim, what's your mission, and how sustainable is it?
All right. I'm going to be as brief as possible, because if anybody out there in the audience has ever had a conversation with me, you know that I will just talk until you walk away. And Bob, you can't walk away here, I don't think. Well, you could, but it would be pretty dramatic. Just very briefly, my mission is to give residents of Bloomington and Monroe County an easy on-ramp to access to their local government, so that they understand how it works and how they can have an impact on it. That's it.
Okay, let me follow up with that and just ask, what's your business model?
The business model is to offer folks a way online to contribute financially. It's the Patreon platform, and Patreon, their basic concept is regular recurring monthly payments as opposed to one big donation. So it mimics somewhat a newspaper subscription. So people voluntarily sign up to contribute really whatever amount they would like. And it's also possible to send me a paper check, but it's purely donation-based. There's nothing behind a paywall. Whatever I'm publishing, either on the website or distributing through the Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning emailed bulletin, is free.
Okay, we'll get into sustainability later. All right. Jeremy, same questions to you, mission and business model.
Oh, those are tough questions, because I really didn't think about it very much. I got laid off from the newspaper, and journalism's what I've done for 30 years, so I just kind of kept doing what I was doing. And then after about a year, people wanted to subscribe, so I set up a Patreon where people could subscribe. And then when the pandemic came along, a lot of national work dried up, so I found myself with a lot of time, so I just covered local news extensively, and the site has really grown. So I guess if I had to think about a mission, it would be to go out and take my camera and show people things that they wouldn't be able to go see on their own, and inform them about things that are happening in the community, so community members and policymakers can get that information and make decisions about how they want to deal with things.
All right. Jim, the longtime mission of the IDS, and how are you funded these days?
Yeah, our mission would be inherently different in that first and foremost, we are a learning laboratory for students at Indiana University who are, have an interest in developing and applying skills that they've learned in the classroom to, journalism and media. In terms of how we are funded these days, we remain really twofold. It's traditional advertising opportunities and donations.
Okay. Can you all hear everything up here? Yep. Okay. Good. I want to ask an overview question about, we're here and we've been having these panels because the landscape has changed and in local media. So I'm going to start with Jim and go the opposite direction. How do you view the local media landscape in Monroe County, Bloomington and Monroe County right now? Is it thriving? Is it struggling? Is it the same as it's always been? I mean, how would you describe it?
Yikes. Well, it's difficult to find a correct word because one of the things to emphasize is that I have the utmost respect for anyone that's in the local news business right now trying to do anything to make it work. And so the local news landscape, I would say right now, is challenging and evolving. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Jeremy?
I think it's extremely challenging because what has happened is newspapers made a lot of money off print ads, and that's gone. So Facebook and Google own most of the traffic, and they set basically the rules on how much ads are going to pay. And unless you have millions of viewers, it's very hard to make enough money off that ad revenue to support anybody, let alone the news sites. So I think it's really important that people subscribe to these different publications if they want them to exist, because without the subscribers, they're not going to be around. We'll have to go get, part of my motivation every day is like, I don't want to go have to hang drywall again, which I did with my father in high school. So try not to have to go do construction work. But I make enough sort of to, with several different streams of income to keep it going. But the business environment for local journalism is really against us, and it has a lot to do with how all the traffic has gone to mobile devices and the people who control the platforms that have that information and what they're willing to give us. Like, for example, last year, Facebook said they were going to give bonus money to different creators that were putting stuff on the site, and suddenly, I had a video that went viral. It got like 15 million views, so I got a couple $1,000s, and then they just decided they're going to cut that off, so you get this money, and then suddenly it's just gone. So Facebook and Google, X, formerly Twitter, are not good partners for local news sites if they want to continue to exist, is my opinion.
Okay. Dave?
So the question was, describe the local landscape as it is now.
Yeah, as it is now.
As it is now.
How would you
okay.
describe it now?
I think the single word that sums it up best is fractured. The most frequent complaint that I hear from folks is that there's not one really reliable, good source of news and information about everything that they care about in the community, which is kind of a tall order, but there's no sort of replacement for the local newspaper as that one place that people can find out what they're interested in, and also know that most people in the community will have seen that same information, so it's a common touch point. So it's fractured. There's the B Square, there's the Wilmingtonian, there's the Limestone Post, there's WFHB, there's Indiana Public Media, there's HT behind a paywall, there's IDS, and I apologize for anybody that I'm missing, probably someone egregious. But the frustration is that even though it might be possible to sort of cobble together an information experience that covers most of what people want, it takes effort and dedication and energy. And that's, I think, what I think about in trying to sort of mull the question of what's the future of local news is how do I meet that demand? How do I expand the B Square so that I am providing a one-stop location? And I can't do that by myself, obviously, but I mean that is ultimately the vision.
Yeah, I want to ask you. You use the word energy, and I want to ask you and Jeremy to expand on that, because when I see what the two of you do as sole practitioners, it makes me tired. So I want to ask a very basic question. I mean, how much time are you spending on covering local news in the community in a typical week? Dave?
You want a number of hours, or you want just a?
I want you to answer however you want.
Well, it's.
I want to give a sense of how much energy goes into this.
It's basically every waking moment. That includes weekends and holidays. I haven't had a day off from the B Square since July 1st, 2019. I mean, occasionally I will keep a time log because I know that a lot of times it's easy to exaggerate how much time you spend doing something. You know, it's like, oh, I spend 100 hours a week. And, you know, when I have done that on sort of 1 week or 2 week trial periods, it's not like I haven't done it recently. I haven't done it in the last probably 9 or 10 months. But it comes out to, you know, somewhere between 80, 90, 100 hours. So it's, when you ask about sustainability, really, financially, I think I can make the case that it's sustainable, but what it takes to generate those voluntary contributions, what it takes is probably not something that I'll be able to sustain, say, into my 80s, because I anticipate getting tired.
Jeremy, same question for the Bloomingtonian.
Well, I did the math once on what I get paid per hour, and it was depressing, so I didn't do that again. It's basically a 24/7 like job. I've gotten woken up in the middle of the night and gone to cover a shooting. You know, for example, like before I came here today, I got a press release about a murder, so I had to put that up. Some days, you know, were slower than other days. Last Friday, I think I cranked out like the stories from 3 different things that I went and photographed, that ended up being like 12-hour day, you know, like. But I found myself working a lot of like 14, 15-hour days, and I had to stop doing that because I'm like, well, you know, I just can't keep up with that. So it's like you take some time in the middle of the day if you need to go run some errands or whatever, you know, or, you know, I try to live my life in between the stories, but you just never know when something's going to come up. So it's a lot of work.
Jim, if you had a bunch of IDS students here and they heard those guys talk about the kind of hours that they're keeping, I mean, how would you keep them in the business?
Yeah, and I want to say first that before 5 minutes ago, I thought that I worked a lot. And at the moment, I do feel like a little bit of a slacker when compared to what I just heard. Yeah, that is the challenge because, you know, the students who are interested in this as a career, they are smart. And they can take a look at this and they can understand that moving forward with this as a career is going to take a lot in terms of dedication and in terms of really being in the work that you're doing. Did you ask how do I convince them to?
Yeah, but you don't have to answer that.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, teaching, you know, journalism today is its own set of things, as you are well aware of, and it's that's when you kind of get into the conversations of what you can do for a community and what you can do with your platform and the value of being able to tell stories and to uplift voices that might not have otherwise happened if not for them and their work.
So what kind of students are you seeing going into the IDS today, and has that changed in the time that you've both in numbers and quality in the time that you've been there?
The best piece of news that I can give to, you know, anyone who's thinking about what the future of journalism looks like is that our numbers in terms of people that are interested in this have never been higher, and in fact are continuing to increase, and so that's good. What we're seeing, I think, what I would call the most concerning part is that we're seeing it's getting more and more difficult to find students who have a vested, dedicated interest in hard news coverage. And we have many that do it and do it well, and we have very impressive students. But in terms of the local news side and the hard news side, that's getting to be more and more of a challenge. we have people that are interested in all other aspects of media and journalism, but the hard news coverage itself is a challenge in terms of interest and numbers.
Could I just offer a perspective on the media school, which is very narrow? I've guest lectured maybe, 3 or 4 times over there. One of those occasions, I was struck by the fact that the room full of, I want to say, 25 people, only 2 of them were men. All the rest were women. And based on, the people assembled on this page, journalists are men with beards. So I was just struck by that, and I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what the demographics of the media school are, but I mean, that's just a fact. That class that I talked to on that day was almost all women.
I don't have an automatic breakdown for you, but I can say anecdotally that predominantly the student leadership, like those who are in editor positions and those that are really putting into work to run things, are predominantly women.
All right. So I'm going to move on to a different topic now, and you guys can talk amongst yourselves too. It's great. You don't have to wait for me to talk. But I want to ask about, the community now and what you think are the issues that are getting the best coverage, and where do you think there are coverage gaps? Jeremy?
Well, if you ever go to a basketball game, there are about 20 reporters covering the same basketball game, and then if there are other issues, such as some public safety stuff, or housing issues that hardly get any coverage at all.
So you're saying IU basketball is the one area that's still getting great coverage?
Oh yeah, because it's possible to make a lot of money from that.
Dave?
Yeah, so I think in terms of what would I add first, if I were able to expand to a full newsroom and I had to pick the first position to hire, it would be, I think, somebody to cover the schools, K through 12, school governance, and also like what's going on inside classrooms. I mean, it's harder nowadays, I think, to get access to that for various reasons, but that would be the place that I would start.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that in terms of both coverage needs and the kind of coverage that gets an audience numbers for us. It's the local government. It is schools, education. It's the general area of what we call cops, courts, and crime. Everything that's happening within the community that has the chance to impact the community is the kind of thing that audiences are also coming to us for. And so if there are both the need and the gap, it would be both the same thing. And then I also would echo that we have lots of people to cover sports. But it's those kind of, the kind of issues that really will impact people's day-to-day life, even if they don't realize it in the moment. Those are the kind of things that we need covered.
I just want to add a point. I'd suggest that the coverage of sports is still robust when it comes to IU sports, but the coverage of sports at the high school level has changed dramatically, and that's just a take from my seat. So,
Well, if I
yeah,
just add to that, I think that coverage of high school and even middle school sports is something that folks really care about. It's something that is one of the main things I think I learned from my experience in South Dakota. I was working, this is for the Peer Capital Journal, which is state capital of South Dakota. It's a thriving metropolis of 14,000 people. But it's a newsroom. We had a managing editor who was also, he reported some, 2 reporters, and the sports guy. The sports guy was the guy who got most of the complaints and calls because that's what people cared about most. Whether the score from the game was in the paper whether it was reported out. And, you know, we were a Monday through Friday paper, so a Friday night football game, we couldn't cover it until Monday. Sometimes there was too much stuff to cover even on Monday. And so for somebody who was waiting to see in the paper the fact that, you know, their kid scored the winning touchdown on Friday, to have to wait until all the way to Tuesday because, hey, the wrestling match was more important than the football game, that was something that was frustrating. And so, you know, I understood that the stuff that I was writing about city council and county commission and like the government stuff, people were not champing at the bit to get that information. It was prep sports. That's what they wanted. And so when I think about expanding, you know, I mean, prep sports is going to be part of it. It just is. I mean, that's simply part of the fabric of our community that needs to be written about and documented.
I see Charlotte here. I'm going to ask her question before she does. She's asked this question at a couple of things I've attended, and it has to do with coverage of business and the importance of covering the business community. Where would you rank that, and why is it important to cover what local business is doing, Jim?
Well, again, I think this all goes into the same category of like these are the people and the decisions and the you know, this is your community, and what's happening in your community is going to, you know, play a big role in your day-to-day life and making sure that we understand what's going on and, you know, challenges that business owners can face. I think that's huge in terms of why that's important for coverage.
Jeremy, Dave?
Just going back to sports a little bit, you know, I used to cover a lot of sports for the Herald Times, and that's a full-time job just to photograph all the basketball games. And if you miss one, people get really, really angry. So the reason I don't cover a lot of high school sports, I don't have the staff. And when I look at my analytics, honestly, like what people look at the most are crime stories. So I do cover a lot of things, and they don't get a lot of engagement or views, you know, so I've only got so many hours in the day to cover certain things. So I guess that's probably a discussion how, if we're going to cover other things like business, you know, and the schools. And the other thing about sports, yeah, is Jim Gordillo does an awfully good job. So the HT is really going to be in a fix if they lose him. But yeah, like I know the high school stuff is getting covered by him, and Dave is over here. He's covering, you know, all the council meetings and stuff like that. I try to cover things that aren't going to get covered or things that I can go and photograph really, really well. And I'm also looking at the analytics, and whether we like it or not, people read crime stories.
Dave?
So you ask where we would rank business. It's in the top 5 of positions I would add for sure. I mean, first position I would add would be schools, and I'm not sure it would be the next one, but it would be either, you know, the third or fourth position I would add is somebody to cover business, and that would include retail. That would include, you know, well, everything we've got, which is too bad because ideally, you know, you would like to have somebody to cover just retail or even just restaurants, as well as, you know, there was the big news out of the most recent county commissioners meeting was this company, which name escapes me if I think about it for 2 seconds. Enhanced, yes. You know, that's a gigantic story. I don't have really enough time to look into it in detail. I can tell you what the commissioners did and what it's going to mean for the tax base, and I can, you know, preview that for the county council when they handle it, and tell you what the county council said about it. But I don't have the time to dig into what that sector of the economy is even all about. So it would be nice to have somebody who knew a lot about that and had background in that and was passionate about reporting in that topic area. And I would like to find that person and hire them and pay them to write about it. But right now, there's not the money to do that.
Okay. I want to mention that, you know, we're about a quarter of our way through the time that we have here. There are a lot of people in the room who have connections to local news, who have connections to the media school, who have worked in government, local government, who have a lot of stake in our discussion up here. So I hope that when I call for questions, that you'll all be eager to ask questions and pick these guys' brains. So the next area I want to go into has to do with researchers from a whole lot of different universities. In the project we've been doing at WFIU TIU, we've talked to people from Syracuse, North Carolina, NYU, and Medill up at Northwestern. They've all written about local news declines in recent years, if not decades. They talk about in terms of ghost newspapers where there aren't any local reporters, but a newspaper's still running. They talk about news deserts where there aren't any local news outlets. They say, and they document, more corruption, unwise spending of taxpayer money, lack of engagement, particularly in elections, and a loss of overall community when these things are happening. I want to ask each of you to sort of talk about your experience in still working in media. Are these concerns that you have? Are you seeing those kinds of things here? And how can we guard against that? Lots of questions, lots of big questions. So however you want to go about it, answering.
Let me just react to the phrase "news desert" as it applies to Bloomington, or as it may not apply to Bloomington. I don't think Bloomington is a news desert. I think that
I don't think any of these researchers would call Bloomington a news desert.
I think the three people here on stage represent a nice big glass of water. I think the most recent thing I read sort of along these general lines was somebody sent me this link to a Poynter Institute article. And they did a study and concluded that there's actually very low demand for local news. So they set up this experiment where they were offering people free subscriptions to the local paper, and I don't know the details, but it sounded very rigorous and scientific, as only the Poynter Institute would do it. And they concluded that people, even when given access to something that would ordinarily be behind a paywall, they said, we'll pay for your subscription. The uptake was some paltry percentage that I don't remember, but it was tiny. And so the conclusion was that, there's low demand for local news. And this is, just a symptom of the fact that people, say, are generally not very civically engaged. It's sort of along those general lines. And I'm not sure that I would conclude that there's no demand for local news or that there's low demand for local news. I think that it might be a symptom of the fact that the kind of information that we have been presenting traditionally through traditional newspaper coverage, there's low demand for that. And I think that the reason there's low demand for it is that it's story-based. So the object that is to be manufactured is a story. So storytelling is conceived as the vehicle by which you convey news and facts. And the idea is that stories are very effective because people love stories, and there's no question that people love stories. People sit around campfires and tell stories. Back in the Stone Ages, the oral tradition of telling stories. There's no question that that is a powerful device. But I think there's a real question as to whether that's the best device for conveying facts that are needed by, say, local decision makers to make important decisions, facts that are needed by residents to decide how they feel about a topic. So if everything is presented through the lens of a story, here, let me tell you a story that has interesting characters who say interesting, inflammatory things, I think that distracts from the fact of the matter. And so what I would say is, we've figured out that the demand for stories that are told by institutional news organizations is low. But if institutional news organizations really put facts back in the front seat and really said, we're dedicated to providing facts, reports, not stories, then I think that we might see a shift in the demand for that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
That was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, this idea of news, gaps in news coverage, like this is an issue that I was just, talking about with my wife this morning. I mean, anecdotally, two of the newspapers that I worked for during my newsroom career have since closed. And then one in particular, a newspaper that I grew up with, the Southern Illinoisan down in Carbondale, Illinois, is going through some huge issues right now in terms of the ghost newsrooms. Like, they were just recently sold. They're now in a series of goodbye columns, which is indicating that their new owners are doing what new owners will do. And so that's kind of a thing that was just talking about this morning. But, I wouldn't subscribe to the idea that Bloomington has that issue. And I think the word that you used earlier was fractured. Like, I think comprehensive coverage, or as close to comprehensive coverage as possible in a town, exist in bits and pieces and places. And, I can think of myself of the number of different outlets I go to learn about what's going on in Bloomington. There's quite a handful each day that has to happen. But I really want to speak to what you were talking about, and that is a different way to go about reporting, right? That's what you're talking about. And I think that is something that these are discussions that are happening in the classrooms at the media school. These are conversations that are happening within the IDS, and I can't promise big miracles and big turnarounds, but I do think that there is at least an awareness of those who will hopefully eventually be in charge of things that your old way of telling a story needs to be thought differently because of the numbers that you're seeing based on local news demand. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think Bloomington is that case, but I do think the idea of thinking about how we tell what's going on to the people that want this information is a big thing that's going on right now.
Let me just note, I think the definition of a ghost newspaper would be a paper like, let's say, the Martinsville Reporter-Times, which there are no local reporters there. There is a new newspaper up there because it was considered a ghost newspaper. There are others in our area and in southern Indiana. News deserts, and Medill Northwestern just came out with a study that is predicting there'll be 4 more news deserts where there aren't any local news outlets in Indiana within the next year. So that's just no news outlets versus some news outlets, and so we're not considered a news desert for sure. Charlotte has a question, so.
I watch television, not too much, but I do watch it. And what I watch is all speculation. It's not news. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of this happening, and what might happen because of this. I decide it's depressing, but it's all speculation. This happens. This terrible thing could happen. Meanwhile, locally, I think what people want, what I want, is the backstory. Uh-huh. We don't get backstory. The backstory is where the interest is, and people can say, "Oh, the Plan Commission voted such and such." Maybe if you're lucky, you get the number or what the basis of the debate is, but you don't get the full meat of the issue. Mm-hmm. That's what I call the backstory. Why, for example, why is there publishing about the police station being sold when there are so many questions attached just to that story itself? The deputy mayor is the agent, is the agent. Do we have questions about that? I do. It seems to me we miss a lot of the details, and so we don't get the backstory. It's not very interesting, and we still don't know what's happening.
So Charlotte's questions and comments have to do with so much speculation on what might happen, but also on the need for the backstory. And she's specifically asking about the police station and the sale of the police station and the relocation of the police station. Comments from you guys?
It's hard to get that information. Yeah, extremely hard. You know what happened in these communities with the ghost papers is there's no reporter. So let's say Spencer had a reporter, and that reporter knows the sheriff, and they know the police person who's in charge, and they have a relationship. So like me and Laura go down to the police station, pretty often, and these people know us and they give us information, and you don't get that information if you don't show up. And what these communities have lost is the institutional knowledge that the reporters had, the relationships the reporters had with local, police officers, fire chief, firefighters, you know who their kids are and stuff, all this is like gone. So there was a local business owner who shot himself in the head, but he did it in Lawrence County. So I called the Lawrence County sheriff, and I never heard back. I never got that information. On Thanksgiving, in northern Owen County, a food bank got hit by a car, and people were talking about it. And I wrote to the sheriff over there in Owen County. I never heard anything back, so in a void of information, there's speculation. So, and when there aren't those relationships, also that politicians and stuff are like going, hey, we don't have to tell people stuff. We'll just keep it all secret. I mean, the Indiana State Police has encrypted all their radio traffic, so we don't know what they're doing. I call them the secret police now because there was a person down the street from me that was murdered, and it took me and Laura a year to find out that there'd been a murder. They didn't tell us for over a year. So this is, how democracies die, this is how dictatorships are born, without this information, you can't hold people accountable. And in a representative democracy, you have to be able to hold people accountable. And part of the job of that is, journalists. And when you have ghost papers and news deserts, then it's not going to work out very well.
I want to introduce Laura Lane, who's sitting in the front row, just because she's. I know, but Jeremy's been referring to her, so Laura Lane from the Herald Times is sitting up here. That's who he keeps referring to. Dave?
Sorry, didn't mean to cough right into the microphone. So on the topic of the sale of the police station, I think that Charlotte's right that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get reported, and Jeremy's right that it doesn't get reported because it's very hard or impossible to get the information. But I want to tell you about sort of a situation related to the sale of the police station that demonstrates that even if the local newspaper prints the information in the paper for everyone to see, it may not have an impact unless somebody actually says, oh, that's an interesting fact, I should take action on that fact. So part of the backstory for the sale of the police station is this deed that has a restriction that says that the land that was donated by the Waldron, Hill, and Buskirk families, and I just looked at my notepad earlier to remind myself of the sequence of names, and I can never do it. I look it up every single time, and I'm not sure, I think I got it wrong when I just recited it, but the three families. So they donated the land, and there was a restriction that, or they may have sold the land, it's not clear to me from looking at the deed. But in any case, there was a restriction that said you have to use this land for a public park, a free public park, and it has to be named after the families. So there was a story published in the Herald Times in 2011 about the grand renaming ceremony of the park, because the deed had been discovered, or at least put in front of then Mayor Mark Cruzan, who said, oh gosh, I guess we should start calling it by its proper name. We need to have an event. We'll invite members of the descendants of the family. It'll be a grand occasion. So the newspaper wrote about it. Fantastic. Now, when I was looking for the documentation of that event, I stumbled across an earlier article published in 2003, December 8th. So almost exactly 20 years ago, about a local history project that a bunch of high school and elementary school kids did. They undertook this history project about the 3rd Street Park, and they interviewed old people, and it was sponsored by some foundation or alliance or other, I don't remember exactly, but it was a front page story about the history of this park that had been put together by this community group, and buried on the inside of the paper, though, was a timeline, and one of the points on the timeline was 1923. Members of the Waldron, Hill, and Buskirk families donate the land with the restriction that it be called the Waldron, Hill, and Buskirk Park. That's in 2003, published in the newspaper. No one at that time apparently said, oh, wow, well, we know that now. We should do something about it. But from the presentation that was given in the newspaper, you know, the timeline was not on the front page. You had to flip to the inside and read it. There's no mention in the running text of the article about that apparently new and exciting fact. I mean, I don't know, 2020 hindsight is easy, and I wasn't even around, so I may have made exactly the same judgment call that, yeah, the story is the kids interviewing the people, and I mean, there's a delightful vignette from Joyce Poling, who at the time, I think she was a county commissioner, and she serves now on the Capital Improvement Board, so she's still very much involved in civic life, but she describes being a swim instructor at the pool that used to be at that park. And, you know, that's a great story. It should be written down and published in the local newspaper. But if you weigh, say, that very interesting story that has its own merit against this new fact, apparently, that this deed required the name of the park to be something different than what it's known as, I would say, wow, you know, maybe if that article had been approached differently, if the headline had been, deed discovered, we're calling the park by the wrong name, that it would have happened 8 years earlier that the park got renamed. Anyway, that's my story.
Thank you for that. No, it's very good. So I want to ask Jim a general question. Then I want to turn it around and turn it to all of you as we start to seek some solutions here, if we need solutions. But Jim, I want to talk about, again, you mentioned that the numbers are really good at the IDS. Do you think that what's their commitment to covering local communities, as opposed to, you know, there's a great number of students at the media school who want to go into sports journalism, and there are people that go to the Washington Post every year or to the Tampa Bay Times. What's the commitment, and what's the school doing and the IDS doing to help with this issue of covering local communities?
The students that we have that are interested in covering local communities are really dedicated and good at it. The problem is that there's not enough of them. I think what I mentioned earlier, like in terms of the numbers are great, but what are their interests? And in terms of local communities, again, we have a handful that are really, you know, show great signs and really good at this. There's just not enough. Within the IDS itself, this has been a really huge topic within the last couple of years, and talking about what can we do as an organization and a publication to not only, you know, serve our mission as an educational, you know, learning lab, but to also have some sort of value and give back to the community. And so those conversations have been happening. And I think in that time period that those numbers have inched up. They just haven't inched up in a way that I hope. And so that's something that we're still working on. In terms of the media school itself and local coverage, we have a sports media program. That to me, unless, and again, I see a couple of faces connected to the media school, and if I'm absolutely wrong, I'm hopeful that they will tell me afterwards. But that would be something that I think would be needed and still has something that we need to work on.
Okay. One last question from me for these three. That's sort of a I don't know if it's a yes/no question, but you know, we're doing these panels because we assume that I think the assumption is there's something wrong in local media in Bloomington and Monroe County in South Central Indiana. Is that an appropriate or proper assumption? Or are we all just, sort of hearkening back to the old days, and really there's nothing wrong, it's just times have changed? Charlotte, we'll let you and others weigh in on that too in a minute. Let me get these guys first, and then.
Well, algorithms are only going to show you what the algorithm thinks you want to see, So going back to what he said, that information is still in the newspaper. If you can go buy the bound copy for $3 at the history sale, if somebody left it there, that information is not really available. Me and a friend have been working on a project where we're trying to save photo archives because those are just getting chucked. You can buy historic photos for $10 on eBay that shouldn't even be there. So the information is there, but it's a matter of how it's disseminated now, and we're letting Facebook and Google decide how that's going to be done, and they've decided to do it in a way that's most profitable to them, and that doesn't really include news, because they've decided that news is only 2 or 3% of their traffic, and journalists want to be paid, so they don't even want it on there. They cut off the news in Canada because they passed a law and told them to pay journalists. So we're going to have to figure out a different way to do this that's going to work for the masses. I think the idea of mass media, it's gone right now because the way algorithms work. I just almost finished with a book about algorithms that I'm reading, and if you throw this out there and that out there and that out there, the way the algorithm is written, it confuses it. The AI doesn't pick it up, so you have to have something that's if you did something that's IU basketball, YouTube channel, and you just report on that, you're going to do really well and get millions of viewers. That's why there's 20 reporters covering basketball. And if you cover the county council meeting and the murder and the high school sports, and you put it on your Facebook and the algorithm sees that, it doesn't know it's confused. So I wonder if part of the reason people aren't getting information is because the algorithm isn't showing it. So the way the newspaper worked, it was analog, and there it is, it's on the page and you can read it, but now we're in digital, so we got to figure out a different way to work with. I think journalism is still the same, and citizens, want information, but it's a matter of how we're going to get that out there with the tools we have, or if we need to create something new,
Yeah, I think, the problem that I see is too great a weight attached to stories as opposed to reports of facts. I'm sorry. I think there's too much weight attached to stories as opposed to reports of facts. And the solution that I'm working on actively now is as part of the sort of the general scheme to expand the B Square to a full newsroom. It's not just adding people. The idea is to add 3 digital tools. One is a simple document repository, a public document repository where really any journalist in town, whatever publication they work for, or any resident who has a document of civic importance, they can create an account and upload that document to the repository. And that's all it is. It's just a repository for documents. It's not articles. It's just PDF files and data sets. So that's up and running. That works now. So if Carrie Thompson sends out a press release saying, here's my team, 5 minutes later, that press release is in the document repository. And if somebody just wanted to monitor the document repository and get their news that way, you could get some news that way. It wouldn't be a great way to get news because, I will upload things to it like the Herald, the page view of the Herald Times of the 2003 newspaper article about the history of the 3rd Street Park. That would get uploaded too, and you would wonder, I wonder why somebody uploaded that. But at least we have it. Great. So the document repository is one leg of the three-legged stool. Another leg is a comprehensive community calendar. And when I say comprehensive, I mean literally every event that is happening in Bloomington. And we're, I think, a pretty good ways towards seeing that as reality, because a lot of folks, including city and county government, already publish their calendars the right way. And the right way means they publish it in a way that generates a calendar feed. That is a URL, that I've got that URL, I can just grab it and stuff it into my calendar display, and now I've got every event that's in their feed with no extra effort. If they change the time of the event, if they cancel the event, if they revise it, because my display is relying on their feed, it automatically gets updated. Not a question of accuracy. So now you have a giant pile of events, and you have to have some way to sort through it, and that's a piece that, you know, it's going to require some work. But really, the main obstacle, I think, is going to be the cultural commitment to event hosts publishing their calendars in the right way so that it generates a feed. There's a prototype to that already up and running on the B Square. If you go to the tab called Big Calendar, you can sort of see a giant pile of events. And your reaction probably should be, wow, that's so much stuff. I can't even make sense of it. And I recognize that. There's work to go. That's why it's a prototype. And then the third leg of this stool, this new digital sort of tool suite, is a comprehensive online encyclopedia, where each entry, the backbone is a timeline. So for a biography, you maybe want a couple of paragraphs just to orient the visitor to the website about why that person even has a page, but then most of it is just a timeline of stuff they've done. So who would get a page in this community? Well, Charlotte Zitlow would get a page. Other people in the audience who would get a page would be the person sitting right next to her. I'll call her out. She's a current elected official, County Councilor Cheryl Munson, and future City Council member Hopi Stossberg, who's sitting there on the end. And I've probably missed either former or future council people or elected officials, and I apologize for that in advance. But those pages, the dominant feature should be a timeline. Topics like the police station, that building, would have its own page. There's a prototype for that page already set up. The beautiful thing about timelines is that they can be a group activity. The encyclopedia is built on its local wiki, is the name of the organization. So it's a wiki platform, and it's a perfectly suited thing for a group activity of a community. So if you said, hey, we're going to, as a group, write news stories, I think that would be insane. But if you say, as a group, we're going to compile timelines so that the people who are writing the news reports have an easy time of it, I think that that's an enterprise that could succeed, and I think it's an enterprise that will succeed. I think I should stop talking right now.
Go ahead, Jim.
What was the question?
Well, yeah. Is there a problem? And I have a follow-up for you, but I want to hear these answers.
Oh, yeah, I think I'll make this part simple. The themes that are kind of happening is that there is a need. There's a lack of people, there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of money, there's a lack of time, there's a lack of tools. And if you think about those inherent obstacles right now in the news gathering and news reporting process, I'm going to go glass half full and say that journalism in Bloomington is doing the very best it can with the situation that is presented to it.
Okay. Jeremy, anything to add?
I guess as I listened to Dave, I just wanted to know how he was going to make this SEO friendly so it can be picked up in a Google search and people can find the information to make it useful for them.
So the question is how to make it search engine optimized?
Yeah, SEO friendly so people can find it and it's useful to the community.
There's standard techniques for doing that. So, I don't think that there's any special extra sauce that needs to be added to that.
So if I say I want to know about the police station and all the kind of secret things that went on, if I put that in, it'll come up. Here's a bunch of documents from B Square, and then I can get those and grab them and put them in my story or send them to another reporter if I'm a community member and say, look, I found this document. You should do a story on it because I found this thing where the public doesn't know about this, but this is kind of weird. You should take a look.
So it sounds like you're talking about the document repository in particular.
Yeah, and just any of the information. If I search for, will it come up on Google? Because that's a problem. Is how these algorithms and AI work to serve up the information might be out there, but it doesn't do you any good if you can't get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess my view of it is there's resources that you make available publicly so that they're easily findable, and you dose it with the magic SEO sauce so that it's as findable as possible. But I think that what people miss is a thing that is pushed to them. Like in the past, we're talking about a physical object that got thrown on your porch. So you didn't have to go look for anything. It just came to you. I think that's the reason that newsletters have become increasingly popular. It's something that people can say, okay, I don't want to go look for stuff. I want somebody to send me the stuff that is important to me. And I expect you to read my mind and understand what's important to me and send me only that stuff. Don't send me any other stuff, just the stuff that's important to me. And so that's why I think, my notion of the future of local news is not just those three additional tools. I mean, you stick with a website that's available out there, searchable and findable on the internet, but you also need ways that people can sign up to have the information pushed to them. So right now, I send out an emailed morning bulletin every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Everybody receiving that has signed up for it voluntarily. And, well, I guess that's not strictly speaking true. If somebody signs up on Patreon, I will typically say, okay, I'm going to add them and let them know, thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. I've added you to the list. If you want to unsubscribe, whatever. But there has to be, for them to be on the list, there's some indication that they're interested in the stuff that might be in the email. So emails is like, that would be the first step, I think, for a way for people to sign up for information to be pushed to them. Another way, that some people already use is you can basically sign up to be notified every time there's an article published on the B-Square. You get an email saying, article published. The newsletter actually grew out of a request of a friend of mine who said, hey, Dave, can you send me an email every time you publish an article? I don't want to keep checking your website. And I thought, oh, yeah, sure. That's an easy thing to do. That's a simple request that you do for a friend, right? And so she told some other people, and I got some requests that they be added to the list, and so I added them to the list. And this was in the very earliest of days. This was in 2019, the summer, when I didn't even have a financial sort of system in place, because my plan was I'll report for 6 months as a loss leader and then say, hey, I want to invite you to contribute to this enterprise. So it was in that phase, and by the time I got to the end of the year and I was ready to actually hard launch, here's 6 months of news, here's the way I would do it, please contribute. I had to, get MailChimp was like an automatic thing that helps you send out mass emails. There were so many people on the list, and I also realized I should probably add more than just links. The early days of the emailed bulletin were literally just like, here's a link. And now there's they're 400 or 500 words long. So.
Okay. A couple other questions have come to my mind. Please get your questions ready because I'm turning it over to you next for questions and comments. But I'm hearing specifically with Dave a future that intrigues me a great deal. I wonder where in this future is there a place for a lot of the news that used to seem important in a community, like things that got put on a refrigerator, and also social service, social justice, nonprofits, how do they fit, into the future? Because I think nonprofits and what nonprofits do in our community, perhaps, my opinion, are being underserved at this point. So where do they fit into this new world order? Jim, you look like you're getting ready.
Well, it's one of those things where I would kind of categorize the answer as the same when we're talking about local business. I think, these are all important, valuable pieces of a thriving community. But again, it goes back to what kind of resources do you have to be able to tackle issues like that. And that would be kind of where I would stick on that one. Like in terms of like cobbling together, not cobble, that's not the right word, putting together the pieces that make for a thriving local news, somebody's still going to have to do the work, and it can't be Dave covering everything for everybody.
So Jeremy gets half of it.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to do all this stuff.
Dave, anything you want to add?
Well, you ask about the kind of news people used to think was important, the kind of thing you would put on the refrigerator, right? So, the vignette from South Dakota, I mean, that's that kind of news. The write-up from the high school basketball game where, your kid, he was the leading scorer in that game, that would be the thing that you would cut out and put on the newspaper, or, the honor roll, things like that. To me, I think that there's an opportunity with, say, an online encyclopedia to actually catalog all that stuff in a systematic way and preserve it literally forever. And when I say that, what I mean is that we pay the folks at the Internet Archive, they're the folks behind the Wayback Machine that you might be familiar with, to archive it. The document repository is something that I will be archiving. I mean, that's the first step. I'm gonna have the Internet Archive archive that forever. And so I think that if your local paper is saying, look, all that stuff, the honor roll, the results of the wrestling team's meets dating back to the beginning of time, they're all there in the encyclopedia in some systematic data set that once you have it set up, all you have to do is add every year, every game that, you add the score. I think that there's absolutely a place for that. It's not going to be something that you cut out and put on the refrigerator, but it will be something that you can share on social media. Like, okay, there's a spot on the page. There's my kid. You share it to Facebook. It's, and I think that the local paper historically and certainly still in South Dakota anyway, serves that validating purpose that, it's in the local paper, it means something. And I think that it's in the local encyclopedia, online, it means something. I think that we could get there.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm kind of a ringer because I'm Jeremy's business partner, but I'm also going to speak up on in terms of being the one who's worried about the money. And so I may be a bit of a pessimist, but the local sports, the high school sports, everybody wants it, but nobody wants to pay for it. And I guess I think your archive idea is awesome. I just wonder, unless you set up a nonprofit, like if Jeremy came to me with that, I'd be like, where's the money going to come from? Because cameras are not cheap, we have to retire someday, so all of that. So also you haven't talked about like ads and the whole sort of scope of business skills you have to add when you're becoming your own news source, and if you're going to do ads or not, and all of that. It's I've been lobbying for going behind the paywall exclusively, no Facebook. That's what I would like. But I guess I'd be interested what, you know, you all think about that, and where's the place for the money? Because the big corporations are making the money. Facebook is making the money, or whatever.
Jim, I'm going to ask you first because you are a business manager for the IDS.
Yeah, one of my primary responsibilities is the money, and there's none. And we don't know where it's going to come from, and it is depressing and sad. So to hear you and to verify everything is absolutely correct. And it's not necessarily, at least, and I'm speaking specifically to our case because I know that it can be different depending on the outlet and the organization. The revenue side, we are recovering slowly. I mean, the pandemic was just a punch, and we are beginning to recover slowly on that end. The problem is that cost to run the operation are far outpacing what we're able to make from the community. And where is that money going to come from? If I would be hosting my own panels and selling this to the entire, world if I knew what the answer to that was. I don't know if that answered any question.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else you want to say about that before we go to?
Well, I fall back on my experience running a skateboard shop when I was 13, 14 years with my mom. And one thing I learned in running a business for a year with my mother is you have like X number of square feet. You have X number of volume in your store. So everything in your store, you pay a certain amount for it, and then you sell for a certain amount. And if you can't make a profit on that, then you don't need it in your store. So I hate to be so blunt, but with the Bloomingtonian, I look at things like what's getting the most viewership, and the analytics, and I have to cover those things whether I want to or not sometimes, so I've had to do a lot more writing because some things that I write about get a ton of views, and I have a very specific, skill set with photography, so I do that. And honestly, part of the site sometimes is subsidized by Getty Images, so you can thank Getty Images for the Bloomingtonian because I went out and did national work, and I get royalties off of that. So I'm always trying to think of 6 or 7 different streams of income because anything can go south at any moment, and you just don't have any control over these international corporations that own all the traffic. So it's very difficult to make money. So
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I'm actually pretty optimistic that a simple voluntary contribution model where everything remains not behind a paywall, freely accessible, email that you can sign up for just by going to the web and typing in your email and saying, I want to get the regular morning newsletter. I think that can succeed, maybe even adding, say, sponsorships, not really advertising per se, but yes, for X dollars, we will put your logo at the bottom of every news article on a rotating basis or something like that. The idea of putting ads into the running stream of the text, I think that doesn't serve anybody's information needs. I think that if the lodestar is, does this serve people's information needs, you'll get the right kind of sort of sponsorship kind of model. I don't think that there was a book published in 2011 by a Duke economist named Jay Hamilton, All the News That's Fit to Sell. And, he's an economist, so he he thinks of things in economic terms, and he has an economic theory. And based on his economic theory, he has concluded that you can't charge a positive, or you can't charge a positive non-zero price for news. And it's based on the idea that there's a difference between, say, to use Jeremy's example, surfboards and wax and stuff like that. Those are not public goods. So the difference between a public good and a non-public good, a newspaper article is a public good. If I read it, it doesn't make it unavailable to anybody else just because I read it. The words are still on the page, it's still usable. But a glass of water is not a public good because if I drink it, it's not available to you, at least not right now. Maybe later. And there's disinfection involved. But so, I mean, basically the premise is a competitive market for public goods. The price you can charge depends on the marginal cost of production, which for digital news is zero. You know, it doesn't cost you any more to add one more customer. And so, given that price is a function of that, he concludes, yeah, paywalls can't work. I guess if it's a non-competitive market, if you're the sole source of something, it could work, which is, I suppose, well, I won't go down that path. But there's specific business models I'm sure anybody can think of that really do involve a sole, unique source that people are willing to pay for.
All right, we have a question in the back. Is that Bill?
It seems to me that the discussion here is mostly in terms of the idea that you have to find a way to make the news organizations profitable for the news organizations to produce content. But they're not the only ones who have an interest in content, producing content. For instance, there's been a lot of discussion here about local sports, and I don't mean IU, but the public school sports. It seems to me that the public schools themselves have a very large interest in producing content related to that, including reports of all the scores and things like that. And that's because that's one of the things that the schools do that people like. People like to support the local teams. And some of you have said that. Okay, and certainly the local school system needs public support. They just ran an election which was put in an election where there was going to be very low turnout. They knew that. And they still only won by 100 votes. Okay? And it seems to me that the news organizations, like the IDS, should get together with the school system and have the school systems provide them with the information they need to publish in a form that they can use it. And the same thing would apply perhaps to local business news. We have a Chamber of Commerce here, and they can produce lots of content, I presume, but they can produce some content. And they could particularly produce content about things where local governments say is making it difficult for local business. And the kind of things that I think about is it doesn't look to me like Public Works here in the U.S. in Bloomington take into account at all the impediments that they impose on local businesses. You have projects that last forever, and they're hampering local businesses. I know one person whose business was hampered so bad that he had to move the business. But it seems to me those kinds of partnerships, and I'm sure there would be others. Health news would be another one, probably.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Yes, you can respond.
I went to my first panel discussion event on the future of news in 2004 at UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, where that local group of local newsmakers were, the thing was citizen journalism in the day, if you all remember that. And so I've been tracking this for a very long time. And what encourages me about this panel that we're having right now is that we didn't start with what is the business model going to be. I mean, we did eventually get to that. But I think if you stick only with how do we recreate what we had in the past, we're just never going to get there. Because, I mean, I used to be in the retail business and I was a buyer, and everybody would be like, I want that same item that you sold 10,000 units of last week. Well, that item died. You can't start with another 10,000 unit item. So what I think is that what I like about Dave's ideas are, like, how do we build this thing, one thing at a time? And how it matches up with Charlotte's question about a backstory. The backstory, if, you know, there are tools now that we have because we're now digital as opposed to completely analog. It's as if we suddenly woke up and realized, oh, you know what, there's no gravity. We better figure out how to be with no gravity. At first we're gonna float around, and we've been doing that for 20 years, floating around, while everything is changing enormously. And now what we have is the opportunity to figure out, hey, we can move furniture with this no gravity situation pretty easily. So I love this panel because so many of these ideas are like, okay, let's start at a low level and try to build this thing up, one thing at a time, a calendar, a timeline, all of that.
Thank you. Any comments to either of those comments before I go back to the audience? I do want to ask about the nonprofit model, and I know Betsy's here from the Community Foundation. She's been at every one of these forums. Can you just say a little bit about the Community Foundation's interest and why you keep attending these Saturday forums?
Sure, I'm glad to be here and thrilled that so many people are here. The Community Foundation and community foundations around the state have really been tasked to become more involved in the discussion of local media and how philanthropy can help. Obviously, local community foundations don't have the kind of resources to, bring back what was there before, but we do have an opportunity to put some funding back into local media, or raise funding for local media, or do a lot of different things. And by the way, Bob, I just learned yesterday that we did get our planning grant from the Lilly Endowment to do a little bit of local planning of how we can support local news. So it is something we've been tracking for a number of years, but like all of you on the stage and all of us out here, we don't know how we can help from a nonprofit and philanthropic standpoint move the needle. So we've spent a lot of time this year meeting with folks and really learning the landscape, following models of what community foundations and philanthropy are doing across the country. I'm sure many of you know about the huge infusion of funding from some very large national foundations to try some things. Obviously, Mirror Indy launching recently. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, but trying to figure out how we can fit in is kind of where we're really trying to explore and really trying to help. And so you'll hear a lot more from us in the coming months about a community survey that we hope to launch very, very early in the year. Because we also know that people get their news from lots of different ways, as you guys have shared today, and we really want to dig more into that and find out where people want to get their news.
Thank you. Okay, if some hands were up. Yes, sir. Yeah.
John Bird, I'm the state coordinator for Braver Angels, and a nonprofit group working to overcome the toxic polarization of society. And everything I've seen supports the idea that conservatives generally trust the media far less than liberals, which is a huge problem for the country. I'm wondering how you all see that playing out. If there's any way you see to change that.
I'm going to call on Dave.
Thank you so much, Bob. I don't know. I mean, I think South Dakota is an even redder state than Indiana, and I was able to function out there as a journalist fine. I think there's sometimes things that journalists can do that don't cost us anything that help sort of make the piece. Thinking about political polarization, for Republicans, they will never refer to the Democratic Party. They will call it the Democrat Party because they don't want to attach the word Democratic to the party because Democratic is a positive thing. And when you say to them, that's the official name of the party, though. So we kind of have to go with that as journalists. But the nod you can give to that is to at least use the word primary, right? Name the party, Democratic Party primary, as opposed to simply the Democratic primary. That might seem like a little thing. Who would care? Guess what? People will notice. They notice. You put party every single time. Yeah, because that's the name of the party. I'm not going to just use the adjective because I know that is a sore point for you guys. Oh, thank you for doing that. But really, that shouldn't be their name. Okay. So, but I think that there's a lot of times it's like, all right, it's a stylistic thing, really. I don't care. It doesn't cost me anything. It's just I remember that when I write about the Democratic Party's primary, I talk about the Democratic Party's primary. I write the whole thing. It feels tedious, but I know there's some folks who will notice that and will say, okay, he understands our sore point and is willing to actually use the whole name of the party, at least, instead of just the adjective. I think that there's probably, hundreds and hundreds of things like that, where it's like, if you just don't go out of your way to, like, stick your thumb in somebody's eye, it counts for a lot.
Let me say I love Dave's answer. I want to address this, though, too, because I think, and Dave has been talking a lot about facts today. I think one of the problems is that we don't agree on a basic set of facts. And I think from a media standpoint, a lot of times, we believe that we're offering factual information that is rejected by, I would suggest, one political party over the other. So how we solve that problem, I'm not sure. Jeremy?
I have an example of that. Like about 10 years ago, I went to the Vietnam Wall with my father. It was the first time he'd been to the wall, and it was set up by Obama. So we had this beautiful day at the wall and everything. And then I read on some conservative sites that the whole thing was for Obama to keep, veterans from going to the wall. What do you do with that, It's not true. It wasn't what happened. So I think sometimes conservatives and liberals or the left, they disagree just on the basic facts of what reality is. And it's to the point that I actually went to I was in Martinsville, and I was photographing Black Lives Matter protest, and a conservative went by and he had a bunch of guns, and I said something to him about, water, if he needs some water. He said something, I don't know what he heard, but he basically said that if I touched his water, he'd shoot me. And then I was up in Indianapolis, and I had a person point a fully loaded AR-15 right at my stomach and laugh at me. It's just the disrespect, And I grew up in a very conservative part of California, like very conservative. Half of my county's Kevin McCarthy's, and the other half was Devin Nunes's, so. And I don't remember this kind of polarization as a kid. And the NRA, came to Boy Scout camp, and gave us lessons on gun safety. They weren't a political group like they are now. So, what happened is, like, when social media came about, I noticed one of the first things, local journalists were the gatekeepers of information. So we kind of tried to keep some of the crazy stuff, out of the newspaper. And on MySpace, suddenly there was a group for everything, like whatever it is, like the celebration of, whatever, so people are able to put out their own information about whatever they want, Flat Earth Society has a page, the moon landing is a hoax, Society has a page, so I think what Dave was saying earlier is, people want gatekeepers. He was talking about curating information and giving people factual information, so that's kind of our job. So I guess at some point, journalists lost conservatives. They don't think what we're telling them is true anymore, and I don't know how we fix that.
I want to add one quick thing, and that is it's a lot of it's relationships too, and I think in the local arena, having relationships with people from all walks of life. I think I want to give a shout out to William Ellis, because I think he's done a great job as a former Republican Party chair of trying to bridge the gap. So, Jeff Richardson and then Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. there's so much good information being shared today. Could comment on a lot of it. One of the things that hit me, actually, you just talked about relationships, Betsy. You talked about working with others. Even your comment about the local sports people being interested, invested, but especially you, Jim, with IU. It seems like we have so many common issues that we could work on together with IU, like housing, for example, like health, like safety, and it seems to me that lifting up the local community, building community, is also part of what IU can do. And I just wonder if there's ways that we can leverage investments by, let's say, the Rotary Club or other local NGOs, along with IU, in building up the community by having internships actually paid for, students getting credit. Well, one of the things that Jill Vaughn wrote, the HT, this past summer, was what a blessing it was to have these 2 interns and how it really lifted the paper up. Could we do something even more ambitious, not just with the HT, but maybe with other local entities, and trying to see where we can collaborate and coordinate what we're doing rather than one-offs. The other piece of this, which is great, and I've done a little reading and meeting with some folks, is there's so many creative people trying to do wonderful things. I'm wondering, in addition to these public forums, is there a way to get some of these people who are actually doing the work and sitting together in a more of a closed session, not a secret session, but a smaller working group, and saying, what can we do? And go back to your point about earlier about, are we doing something wrong? I'd say, what are the gaps, and where can we fit in and do things differently? So in Martinsville, it's a for-profit model. Up in Indy, this is a not-for-profit model, sort of based on the Salt Lake City model. And there's a lot of exciting things going on, very creative time. But I just think, rather than looking at things, what can we do at this group or that group or the other group, what could we do collectively, and bring in, to your point, Betsy, bring in the community and see where we could actually make some investments, and then they could be leveraged, that we could actually do things together. But the huge player in this town is IU. And if IU, not to put you on the spot, but if IU could invest in this in a different kind of way, not to minimize the financial impact, but the payback for IU is to have a community that's strong and vibrant and engaged, because that's also part of what they're selling when they have people come to IU, not only to teach here and to go to school here, but also for staff. I mean, it's a win-win for everyone if we can find a way, a model, an approach to engage everyone in this process. So I'm grateful that you're doing this panel, and I'd like to see it go even further.
Jim, do you want to respond? I know you don't handle all the money. As you said, you don't have any, but
struggling for words right now. On the surface, everything that you're talking about sounds fantastic. Particular to the HT, I believe the 2 interns that were referenced were both IDS students. And in terms of educational opportunities for students, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm in my role. We're a learning lab, we're an educational outlet, and the things that we can do to provide those opportunities for students, I'm always going to be for it. The IDS's relationship with Indiana University has been a tough thing for me to navigate during my time here. And the idea of, the IDS as an organization partnering with the general IU as sort of like a driving point for initiatives and projects and funding and opportunities, we have big hurdles in terms of just the general understanding of what the IDS is and how it serves IU and getting IU to understand that. That's the best political answer I can give. And so if you or anyone in this room has an idea of who that person or those persons are at the IU level who would be willing to have those conversations with me, I can make that call, send that email as early as Monday.
Charlotte, Dave, do you have something you want to add quickly?
If Charlotte was going to respond to that, I will defer to her. I was also going to follow up.
It's a very short response. My experience is fairly long now. I'm sorry to say, very long. For the last 50 years, I've been involved in politics, and I've been in many situations where I've been a single person fighting a bunch of people, including Democrats on occasion. And my experience is that You have to listen, you have to talk to people that you don't agree with, you have to work out a relationship with people you don't agree with, which means sort of swallowing yourself for quite a while. But it's the only thing, it works, I believe in it. I believe in working with people of the opposition, and I truly think it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of giving up of yourself, but I think it's the best way we have to work on it.
I hope you're all able to hear that. She talked about the importance of building relationships, especially with people that you might disagree with, and working together to try to come to a good solution. We would not have a courthouse, and we would have an incinerator if that hadn't happened. Dave?
Yeah, just to follow up on Jeff Richardson's comment about the role of the university. First of all, I neglected to mention Jeff Richardson as a former elected official when I was sticking through people, and the only reason is I didn't see him. I know that he's a former elected official, just to be clear. I just didn't. I can't even see him right now. He's behind the man in the plaid shirt. The thing is, if you go to the, I was trying to remember what year he actually served on the city council and who he served with. You can look that up easily on the one of the prototype pages I've set up on the local online encyclopedia. So there's a list going back to the beginning of city council's time in the 1920s, where every row of the table is a year of the city council. And if you can just search the page for Jeff Richardson, and he'll pop up with, I can't even remember one now, but I just made the cutoff. 1920s. now. But to respond to the substance of Jeff's point, obviously, yeah, Indiana University is a big player, and it, I think, should be a part of the conversation about how the university can help provide resources. But also, when folks ask me, well, when you add coverage, when you expand your newsroom, are you going to cover IU? And my answer is, well, not in this first phase, no. The capacity it would take to cover Indiana University as an institution, to watchdog Indiana University, I would say we're just going to draw a line. I'm going to say we can't do that. That, the Indianapolis Mirror, the statewide entities, it's a state institution. They will hand off responsibility to those folks to cover Indiana University.
Yeah, there's a question right there. Yeah.
Stafford, you mentioned the history of the park project. At that time, I was the director of what was called the Evergreen Institute on Elder Environments, and we were trying to build senior housing in what was the Coca-Cola building. And we felt it was important to situate public conversation about that relative to both the past, the present, and the future. And so what the students were actually engaged with, and we got funding from the Indiana Humanities for this project, was to do just that, approach the history of the park. They interviewed a lot of older people who skinny dipped in the pool, or remember Elizabeth Bridgewater's son desegregating that swimming pool, running on the hot steps. There was a wooden platform that you had to run across over a rapid period of time to go from the pool to the changing room, that kind of thing. And then they interviewed people that were using the park at the time to try to understand how it was currently being used. And then they did some visualization at the end of the project to envision what the park could look like 20, 30, 40 years from now. And the reason I bring that up is not just to let you know, Dave, because it's a very interesting story, but that news, I think, should also be place-based in some respect. And one of the reasons Laura Lane is such a popular reporter locally is because her stories are place-based. But that also involves an important attention to time and chronology. And sometimes the word news is about, well, if it's not new, it's not news. And this is kind of an extension of that backstory idea that we need to be able to have the resources to write the stories over a long period of time. And people of a certain age, including me, will appreciate the value of that because we sometimes see the same story reappearing again without any reference to the past. And I don't know how you do that, and maybe an online environment makes that more difficult or less, I'm not sure. I think photography helps a lot in that regard, in putting stories into place. So I appreciate, you know, what you're doing, Jeremy, in that regard. But that's my point: is how can we extend the follow-up for things that we were bombarded with on a daily basis?
It's a great question, and I have to say I work in a newsroom now I work a couple of days a week there with a lot of young reporters, and I'm always amazed at their amazement about things they learn about stories that have been going on for 25 years, and in Bloomington. It's like they just learned about it. You guys want to respond to the historical?
I just wanted to respond to the notion of place and the role of journalism in helping to, make the place a more pleasant and productive and wonderful place to live, but also to define what that place is so that people understand what that place is all about. So whenever I'm invited to talk about what I do with the B Square, I mean, one of the things that I talk about is place. And the way I try to illustrate it is with photography. And, I'm not a photographer, but I can certainly talk about what I value in a photograph. So an easy kind of example is if I've got a really close-up picture of a red-tailed hawk in flight. I mean, I love taking those kinds of pictures. But what I like even more is when I can get a photograph of a red-tailed hawk with the dome of the Monroe County Courthouse behind it, ideally sitting on the fish, right? So, because to me, that it's about the place. People around here, anyway, they know where that place is. It's not necessarily a great wildlife photograph, but it's a great photograph about the place. And so, when I approach writing about a topic, one of the questions I ask is there a way I can build a map out of this? So if it's a planning commission project, that's an easy thing. There's always a map to be built. If it's something in front of the plan commission, you show people where it is on the map. Jeremy mentioned the news release that the BPD sent out today about the murder investigation in an encampment west of town. So typically, I don't cover crime, but when BPD sends out a news release, I will take the news release, and the one value add that I can give is I will build a map and provide a link to the dynamic version of that map so that people can understand where is the place that they're talking about. So, I mean, that's a very long way of saying, yes, I agree with you about the importance of place.
Thanks, Phil. Jill Bond from the Herald Times.
Hi. So my question is about artificial intelligence, since this is the future of local news. How are you experimenting with artificial intelligence, including tools like ChatGPT or something that may help you to create an image that doesn't actually exist in real life? What is your ethical responsibility to the users of your platform to let them know you're using AI? And what are your concerns about potential copyright infringement?
Here's some specific ways that I have experimented with AI. So the last two columns I've written, I didn't have any art that was handy, or you need really a graphic artist. You say, I want some dogs, I want a polling place, because the article involves an appropriation that affects the animal shelter and paying for elections, and that's the connection. And so I asked Bing Create to make me a thing, and it's kind of a hilarious image. But the caption says this image created by AI. I don't think it looks maybe almost real. I don't think you would mistake it. But you don't know that for sure. You need to put the acknowledgement that it's AI generated in an obvious place, because people will believe anything. And as proof, in the intro, it was mentioned that my first foray into journalism was teeter talk. I would interview people on my backyard teeter-totter. So I would invite them, and part of the documentation was a portrait of them sitting opposite me, straddling the teeter-totter. So long story short, Bill Clinton was coming to town. I promised people I would get him as a guest, and I photoshopped him on the end of the photo on the teeter-totter, and I made up an interview on the theory that, look at that image, it's obviously photoshopped, and lo and behold, people didn't get it. A lot of people didn't get it. In fact, the Ann Arbor equivalent of Bloom Magazine, they called me up and wanted to know, what was he like off the teeter-totter? And so I said, look, man, I'm sorry. But the lesson for me was, people will believe anything. Another more sort of concrete way that I have experimented with ChatGPT is to say, all right, here's a bunch of text. Give me 20 headlines. And, it doesn't do a bad job at that. But sometimes you get ideas that, I can use that word. That's a shorter word. I'm not going to say to the reader anywhere on the page, AI helped me write this headline, but, help with headlines. One specific sort of crunching kind of example, the deed to the park, the old deed with the restriction. If you OCR that, the software that I use, which is a kind of AI, it produced basically a sea of letters. So all the letters had a space between them. They weren't words. And I said, oh, okay, well, I guess I could go through and delete all the spaces, but you have to pay attention, and that's a half hour of tedium. A human being shouldn't have to do that, but maybe a robot. So I tried it out. I gave that text to ChatGPT, and I said, here's the background, here's where it came from, fix it. And in the blink of an eye, it fixed it. So, if I've got, say, a long description, a transcript that has been generated by AI, and I want to see, okay, can ChatGPT summarize that? I mean, I've tried experimenting with that, and basically it's not good enough to use. But it is sort of interesting to see, all right, so what does it think about the semiconductor company and the jobs, and what does it choose to highlight if I just tell it, summarize the key points? So it's not near good enough yet where I would feel comfortable even working from it as a draft. But here's my vision. You have a comprehensive online encyclopedia with all the timelines in place. A journalist, their first step is not to write a news report. Their first step is to go modify the archive. You modify the timeline. This thing happened. There's probably a lot of timelines you have to modify in order to capture everything that happened in that event. Say somebody wins an election. Well, you modify the biography of the person who won, the person who lost, the election results page, all that stuff. You just modify the facts. And then the encyclopedia itself, it notices, hey, I've been modified in a systematic way. Let me generate a basic factual report of all the changes. I think there's potential there for getting a lot of basic reporting done, and you can, I think, more easily teach people how to modify a timeline, to add facts to a timeline, than it is to teach people how to write a newspaper article. So,
Jim, you or Jeremy, you look like you wanted to. Jim, you looked like you wanted to comment.
Well, it's interesting because if you remember all the way back to the beginning of this panel, each of us were introduced with like a couple of paragraphs of our background. And we were asked to submit that, and I have a standard one, but I actually put my resume into ChatGPT and asked them to provide a 2-paragraph summary just so that I could see what it looked like, and it turned out just to be a little bit too fluffy for my taste. And so I ended up, using what I normally use. But when it comes to the IDS, I mean, it's important to note that I don't produce content for the IDS. It's student-run, student choices. And so I'm speaking what I think to be true, and I could be proven wrong, but what I think to be true is that we haven't implemented that into coverage or things that an audience can receive so far. I do know that one of the ideas that has been talked about in terms of how to use that platform for the benefit of our audience is taking our articles and translating them into different languages. We've experimented with that as a possible use. But to the other things that you talked about, I would hope that it would just be transparency and reporting. If there is a need to tell the audience where a particular element of reporting came from, then I think you just make that as clear as possible. And then in terms of copyright, again, maybe I'm looking at this too simple. It would be the same as it would with any copyright that you might come across in the reporting process.
Laura?
So I just wanted to ask Jeremy, because he scooped me on a story today, because I came here instead of writing up that there'd been an arrest in the murder in the homeless camp. So I want to know, how did you get that out so quick, and did you use
It's a trade secret.
You've worked together long enough that I think I know.
Well, first of all, I don't use Chat or whatever it is to make images, because
Oh, no,
you don't
not
make up images, like.
Never, you would never do
And
that. You make real
you know what else AI is not going to do? It's not going to go to the homeless camp, after this and show you what it looks like, because people want to know what the murder scene looks like,
Exactly, and I hope you're going there to do that.
And it's
because
not
I am
going to.
not.
It's not going to listen to the scanner and go out to a car stuck in a tree at 2 a.m.
Right, but I want to know about, since again, you've got the story up and I do not. Jill, I'm going home and I'm writing the story and you can post it as soon as I'm done. But I thought, I just wanted to be here.
Saturdays are sacred.
Yeah, I know, I try to do other
Well,
things on Saturdays.
first of all, going back
But
to
just real quick.
nonprofits, there's certain things that just don't get any, a lot of traffic, so there's some
so we
things
don't
if I
have
get a
that.
release, I attribute it where I got it from, and I'll take it especially if it's really poorly written and plug it into ChatGPT, but it spits out garbage, so
So
I
I
sit
just
there and
wanna
spend
know
half the
about
time
today's
fixing all the
story.
stuff to put in.
I know, but what about today's story that you have scooped me on? Did you use AI or ChatGPT? Because what I noticed was there was some troubling, awkward language in there that I don't think you would ever use.
Yeah,
And
sometimes I write those, and
Well, tell me
sometimes
about I wanna know
I just
how
take the whole
today's
thing
story-
and plug it into
Can
ChatGPT,
you
and then I
tell me about
rewrite
how
it.
today's story came about? Just tell me how it.
Well, I got a press release from Patago, so.
Right, so
what-
did I, but
yeah.
you have a story and I don't. What did you do with it?
Well, he ignored me for an hour and did that. He didn't do the dishes or whatever he's supposed to do.
Okay, but how did he do it? I want to know the process of the story coming from the news release from Patago to
Right.
being on your site, way before mine is, which is still not there.
Well, first of all, we're a visual journalism website, so we do photography first, and then writing is secondary, because that's what the AI wants, and I don't have a staff, so it's the difference between you're going to get this news or not get it all. So I figured out
How
that,
did you get the story today?
yeah, basically I use ChatGPT. You know how a city editor works, And
Sorry, what?
a city editor
I don't have one, but yeah, I mean, I know what it's.
and copy editors, I use it like a copy editor, but
But
I do most of
the. Because I haven't used it before.
yeah, because you got to do all the reporting, before you
But
plug
do
it into
you
that.
say, here's my reporting, or do you say, I need a story about the arrest in a homeless camp shooting, because I don't know.
No, I'll do all the
process.
reporting, or I'll get the information, and then sometimes I'll plug it into ChatGPT and tell it to write it up, so I could do it quick, and then I got to rewrite it because it puts all kinds of opinion and garbage in there. So,
what did you do
ChatGPT,
today, and did you have to rewrite it a lot, I guess is what I'm asking.
yeah, I had to rewrite, about half of it.
And I didn't proofread it, which sometimes I get.
So you might have noticed some awkward, strange words that we really don't use a lot.
Words that are just not normal parts of vocabulary.
But people complain about my writing anyway, even if I write it myself.
So you think it works out better if you use this new technology because you're
I kind of use it as a copy editor, is what I do. So when you wrote before, you hand everything to the copy editor, and like a rewrite man,
Wait.
Wait.
There's nobody for me to hand it off to except Jill, who's off.
But what I'd never do is tell ChatGPT just to write something without having all the reporting done myself or fact checking everything.
Okay, That's what I wanted
So-
to know,
Yeah.
is how you go about doing that so quickly, because again,
Yeah. But we've been using AI for years, spell check is AI, we have Grammarly, all these sort of things, so.
We've got about 5 minutes to go, and we have at least 3 more questions I want to get in. Yes, sir.
More about Dave's vision for media. It sounds like it's an immense wiki of Bloomington that covers everything, the university, arts, medicine, business, eventually everything. But most of us would not want to wake up in the morning and just say, look at the wiki to find out the news. I mean, it's all there, but there has to be another step, and it might be multiple organizations mining that for various purposes.
Dave, 90 seconds.
Sure. So the idea is not that you send people to the wiki and say, monitor that and see what's new. The idea is that obviously there needs to be a report based on the changes that are made. And maybe you write the report and make the changes later, or maybe the changes, you make all those changes and then you look at the change log for the website and you put together the report about that. But yes, of course, I mean, you have to send somebody something that summarizes all the changes that were made in some sense. And they don't, I mean, the thing is, you can link then from that report to all the places in the encyclopedia that they need to know about if they want to know the entire history.
But I'm sort of asking, who owns that? It seems like it should be the city.
It would be the nonprofit named Local Wiki. It would be our job, though, to make sure that we back up our chunk of it, that we would pay the Internet Archive to archive that chunk. So if Local Wiki disappears, we still got it.
Glenda.
And they're partly about communication and partly about community that you were talking about earlier. And one of those is, I just realized recently that there's somebody who's basically doing the obituaries and stories about what's going on in Ellettsville, because they lost most of what they used to have with the Ellettsville Journal. And I'm wondering if there's any way that that work is also being done for free, can be connected to a link in the HT or a link to somebody else, so that more people could be aware of it. And secondly, I want to remind everybody that the public library has been working on a timeline since, I think, the bicentennial.
Yeah.
And they have some of that. They still, and that was mostly lots of volunteers too, and they still have lots more they want to do. But a compliment to what you're talking about, Dave. So, and they're working on other things that have connections to specific place. So.
Okay. Thank you. 2 more, at least.
Just a quick response
Okay.
to the idea of obits. If every funeral home published a calendar with their visitations that had a feed to it with the text of the obit as a description in the calendar event, we would capture that with no extra effort.
Okay. Yes.
First, I wanted to say I'm a Patreon for B-Square, because you do deliver facts to us that are unobtainable and not
Thank you.
humanly possible to go to all those meetings. I don't know how you do it. And so I feel like you are my civic substitute. In a lot of ways, I can read about what happened without a spin, which is very, very nice. And it ends up being the conversations I have during the day. People who have read it, people we are sharing that information. So it is a value. I pay a lot more for it. And I became a Patreon when you had it for free. And then you said it might go away if I don't get this funded. And then I started paying.
That was an episode where people compared it to me threatening to kill Old Yeller.
Yes.
I felt a little bit bad, but it was a measure of my frustration at the time. So I appreciate the fact that you did not have a completely negative reaction to that.
Yeah. So my question is, though, I see everybody on here doing something really, really, really well. I turn to Bloomingtonian for crime and scanner things for the other side of the story. You go out to those homeless encampments and take those pictures and talk to those people. That's not anything we're going to see when they report on what happened in those meetings. You know, the decision was made about clearing people out.
at a meeting, then the story is written over here by somebody with a perspective, and then you take the pictures of the people that it's happening to. So I have to patch all that together. But my question is, you mentioned nonprofits a couple of times, and there are a few nonprofits here in town that are doing news, WFHB and the Limestone Post, and Ron is here. And I was intrigued by some of this cross-pollination that is happening now. Like, I think you have something, and you pop up in the Limestone Post sometimes?
Actually, not the Limestone Post, but I read one of the morning bulletin items for WFHB each week.
Okay, and then this investigative report that is being cross-pollinated between Limestone Post and WFHB now. And my question is, have you all ever talked about the possibility of bringing some of this under one nonprofit roof, where some of the things that cost so much could be leveraged across what you do, and maybe I could benefit from my increased Patreon of getting all of this stuff in one place?
I don't think that we've talked about that kind of grouping under a single umbrella where it's like a single place. I think that would be pretty complicated. But as far as the nonprofit world and where to locate, say, a comprehensive news source for Bloomington, this place right here actually is the leading idea for me. The Monroe County History Center, it's an existing nonprofit. News is nothing more than very, very recent history. And I think that you could run a newsroom, not necessarily physically out of this place, but out of the organization. You could have reporters who are employees of the History Center. Use that existing nonprofit, the existing familiarity, the existing sense of place. Where is this news operation based? The History Center, it's downtown on 6th Street. So I know we're crunched for time.
Oh, one more question.
I'll try to keep it really, really short. So a lot of things that people said gave me a lot of ideas, and one of the things that you mentioned was that idea of citizen reporting and that phase that we went through basically where we kind of thought anybody can report the news and anybody can be a journalist and anybody can put that out online for free, and that all the papers were then all of their content was free, right? And then all of a sudden it was well, really they're ad driven and that's not working for us anymore, and so now we need some kind of funding source, and all of a sudden we had subscriptions and everything wasn't free anymore. And that I think that we as individuals then have to be yeah, it can't be free, we have to pay for it somehow, right? We have to pay. Yes. And then my mind goes, well, that's really a justice issue then, because then the people who can pay are the only ones that are going to get the news. And so there needs to be something that enables people who can't pay to get the news. And when there were print papers, that was the literal physical paper that somebody would read and then dispose of, that somebody could have in the public library and they could go and do it. And yeah, there are computers in the public library, but if it's behind a paywall on a website, it's still not accessible. So there's your idea of trying to get grants and things like that. So if you frame it as a justice issue, which it is, then you can go, okay, help us keep this local news, these stories that are important to the people who live here, free and accessible somehow, and still manage to fund the people who are important and integral, because not everybody can be a successful journalist. In my opinion, it just did not work, this experiment of citizen journalism that anybody can report stuff. We need people who are professionals in this field, who have gone to school, who understand the complexities, the importance of neutrality, the importance of facts, ethics, all of that stuff. And in order to get those people, we need to make sure that they're not broke.
Thank you.
Yeah, putting all of that together somehow. So that's as short as I can say.
Thank you for that. Okay, last comments. I don't want to leave you guys hanging. So any last comments? Another, a debate, a minute or something. So, doesn't have to be a debate, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I thought you were trying to provoke me.
Not trying to, no. But it's everybody gets their last minute. So.
Thanks to the History Center for hosting this. Thanks, Bob, for moderating. And thank you to everybody who showed up. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Jeremy?
People can subscribe to the Bloomingtonian Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Please subscribe to my site and others, and thanks for having this panel.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you to the History Center for hosting this. Pay for the news. Spread the word.
All right. Boy, they didn't take a minute. You can tell they are not running for anything. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the History Center, Andrea and Hillary and everybody who's here. We appreciate it. Thanks.